Hey guys, it's Super Puffle here. Now, I've never actually really done something like this, so this is kind of a first for me. Sorry if you hear some clicking. I'm just editing my sound right now, so it doesn't sound all like like crazy. So I'm gonna tell two stories of my own, and then I'm gonna have two stories from Reddit that are, ghost stories, paranormal stories. So to begin with my first story, I used to live in an apartment. Now, these apartments I'm not going to name, but I used to live in these apartments, and to me they were very haunted, and there was definitely some type of demonic presence there. I remember one night I was playing my Xbox 360. It was about 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. I was playing Halo, and I was getting kind of tired. And I heard this crying. Now, living in apartments, that's kind of normal. You're going to hear someone, crying or something, or uh, arguing or something. It's a given. But I was sitting in my room, and I hear this crying, and I'm like, okay, whatever. It's probably just, the neighbors, or it's probably just someone above me, or just someone in general. I didn't know. I didn't really care. It didn't really bother me. So, 5 minutes go on, this crying is still going on, and then it starts to get louder. And I'm like, is someone, hurt? Are they trying to get down the stairs or something? I was trying to think it out, logically. And I was like, okay, well. So I kind of sit there and listen, and it starts getting louder and louder, and it sounds like they're in the living room. And the living room from where my room was, is if you would just open my door, you could see straight in the living room. The light from my room would go straight in the living room. You could see everything. And I thought someone was in the living room, and I was like, okay, it sounds like someone's seriously hurt. So I opened my door to look, and it took a second for my eyes to focus, and I see this black mass, and it's just hunched over in the middle of the living room. And so I sat there and I tried to focus in on it, and it just looked right at me, and it was like looking at the night sky if there were only 2 stars in the night sky, but I could see its form, and it had this black leathery skin and this huge bloated head. So it started to stand up, and it was super skinny, and you could see through its skin, its ribs and its bones and all of these things. So I watched it stand up, and it started to move towards me. Now, it didn't really look like it was walking or moving its limbs. It was more or less like it was moving in a shadow type movement. Its movements looked like if you were for instance, okay, if you're in a game like Battlefield or Call of Duty, you get flashbanged. Everything looks like it's got a bunch of shadows to it, and it's all shifting and everything. That's what it looked like, and it was moving towards me. Everything else was fine. So I closed my door, took a second to gather my thoughts, and I was like, okay, I'm a little tired. I should probably just take a breather real quick, and then I'll look again. I'll see if there's anything out there. So, I take a minute, and I take a breather, and I open the door. And it was right there, right in the hallway coming towards me. This thing was hunched over, and if it were standing straight up, I'd say it was either 9 feet tall or just something crazy. And it reached up towards me, and I closed my door, and I just sat down back in my bed, and I just kept playing games. I just ignored it. Second story, this one still kind of gives me a little chills here and there, but nothing too bad. I remember we used to have this old brown recliner in the same apartment, and I was sitting there watching TV. I think I was watching at the time, I think I was watching SpongeBob or something. I was sitting in the chair, and I was just kind of watching it, and I hear this crackling. When you hear this is gonna sound super stereotypical, but I swear on everything, this is exactly what I heard. I was watching TV, and I hear this fire cracking. When you hear an ember pop in the fire, and it makes that loud snap and a crackle, and or it's a loud pop. And I kept hearing it, and I was like, what is that sound? I'm like, is the house settling, or is there someone walking around upstairs? But at that point, the only neighbor we had at that point, he had moved out. And we were really kind of the only tenants living in that apartment at the time. So I'm looking around, sitting in the recliner. I'm like, what the heck is that? And out of the corner of my eye, I see this white mass just drop from the ceiling. And I look down at the bottom of the recliner, and I just see like these white fingers kind of peer over, and these beady black eyes look at me, and I blink, and it was gone, just gone. And then I got like these images in my head of this thing that had like its arms and legs backwards on the ceiling, and it crawled out from my room, and it had this smile of just teeth. And it went from like its ear hole to ear hole of smile and teeth. And so one time, I brought it up to my mother, and I didn't mention it to her for about 3-4 years. And she told me that I was at my dad's one time. And when I told her it, she just kind of got really uneasy about it. She was like, "It's weird that you mentioned that because I think you were at your dad's at one time or whatever, and your door was open. I could see in your room, and I was about to leave for work. And I remember I went to pass into to leave, and I saw this thing in your room with its arms and legs back against like behind the door, and it was looking at me and staring at me, and it was smiling like it was mocking me." And she said she went in my room, she did a prayer, told it to leave, that it wasn't welcome, and that she never felt it again, and I didn't either. And then another time my grandmother was in our house, and she said that she swore on her life that she heard someone come like literally full on sprinting up from behind her. Like we had tile, we had linoleum in our kitchen, and it makes like a slap sound whenever you run on linoleum, because we had concrete, because we were on the bottom level. And she said she heard someone come running up behind her, and it made her jump. If it was someone running above us, we would have heard it would have been like a stomping sound. If you've ever lived in apartments, you'll understand what it sounds like. But that's my creepiest, one of my creepiest stories. So now I'm gonna read 2 creepy stories from Reddit. First one is called my ghost story took almost 30 years to develop, by February Sun from Reddit. He says, "Note, I posted a shorter version of this as a comment in some Ask Reddit thing a while back under my first Reddit account, before I even really knew what Reddit was." So he's basically just saying he posted it somewhere else. Alright. I moved around a lot as a kid. I was passed from family member to family member. When my mom was in between reasonable living situations, or whatever she was doing, who knows, she had me on her 16th birthday, so people covered for her. When I was in the 2nd grade, I moved in with her and her new boyfriend. We lived in a house on the side of the hill in the Bay Area, California. This house was a long, narrow house that had a bedroom on each end. My bedroom was on one end, my mom's on the other. Next to her room was the living room, then the kitchen/dining room. Then my room. There was a basement, laundry area, and a small apartment unit down there, accessible from the outside, since the house was on the side of a hill. You could get into the basement via a narrow staircase just outside my mother's bedroom door. I only remember living there for a few months, but the basement terrified me. We had a couple Dobermans, and when I was required to go to the basement for anything, I always took one of the dogs with me. They made me feel more safe. But the basement still freaked me out. The whole house freaked my mom out. She told stories of lights going on and off, the dogs jumping an alert in the middle of the night when nobody else was there, footsteps in the house that she thought was me up late at night only to find me sleeping quietly in my room. She always slept with the dogs in her room and hated it when we were there alone overnight, when her boyfriend had to work late or whatever. After a few months, we rented out the basement unit to a young couple, early 20s, as white-bread American as you can imagine. They kept to themselves, but were really nice whenever I ran into them down in the basement. The door to their apartment was in the laundry room, which also served as a kind of entryway from the outside. When I ran into them, they'd ask how I was, talk to me for a bit. They were very nice. I remember feeling far less afraid of the basement. Whatever had been freaking me out seemed to diminish more once they were there. It was a very good thing. I don't remember much else about them. A couple years ago, about 30 years after this, My mom got to talking about that house. Somehow, the conversation had turned to ghosts and hauntings, and my mom just started talking about how much that house freaked her out. She told her usual stories of the lights and footsteps and dogs going crazy. At some point, I mentioned that it seemed so much better when the couple moved in. She looked at me like I was crazy. What couple? The young couple, the one that rented out the basement apartment. She was adamant. No couple ever lived down there. Nobody rented the apartment. I was clearly making this up to screw with her. She was dead serious. Honestly, she also doesn't really have the skills to pull off that level of deception. So apparently, I spent a few months living and talking with two ghosts that lived in my house. I don't know if they were the same thing that freaked me out before. I don't know if they were protecting me from that. I don't know what they were. What I know is that they were absolutely real. I spoke with them both. I talked to them in the apartment. I thought it was strange that they never unpacked. There was always the same boxes all over their apartment. But that was it. They were absolutely real. I lived with two ghosts that I didn't know that I had for almost 30 years. Now, to me, that story is scary, mainly because it's the factor of the unknown. When you grow up around something like that and you don't really realize what's happening until later in life, it kind of puts that shock in your head like, dude, that whole time that basement was empty, there was no one there. That's just freaky. The next one is called Apartment Ghost. This one actually kind of gave me the chills a little bit. There was apparently he says this was our case, and it has a link to the investigation for them, like some backstory on it all. It says myself, mother, sister, and brother had recently moved into an apartment after moving away from his father. So I'm gonna post that link in the comment section or description, and the description. So if anyone wants to go see that investigation, they can. But the Reddit post is Apartment Ghost by Under Orion's Belt. So here we go. I'm just gonna start from the backstory again. Posted this as a comment in another thread, thought others might like to read it. This is our case, blah blah blah. Some backstory on it all. Myself, mother, sister, and brother had recently moved into an apartment after moving away from my father. Shortly after moving in, we started noticing weird things happening in the apartment in which we lived in. Random noises, footsteps banging on the walls, things never being where we put them, etc. At that time, we were only tenants in the building, as if it was a brand new 3-apartment building. Shortly after, other 2 apartments were occupied, and they too kept hearing the same noises. One of the tenants was a couple who had 2 kids and a dog. Around August, their children started making friends with the little white kid that neither of the parents could see. So, of course, they chalked it up to imaginary friends. Shortly after making this new acquaintance, their dog started acting real odd, and randomly would start chewing up the carpet in a certain area, and started to growl at the kids when they were playing with their friend. In the other apartment, where the tenants had some health issues, their machinery would kick on randomly, and their cat would hide away randomly and hiss at their kitchen area. And during this time, we would still hear the knocking and noises. Come September, the children started telling their parents that their friend was hurting them and would have unexplained scratches and bite marks on their arms. Around the same time, the dog started trying to escape on a daily basis, and the parents would fight to the point that it was an all-out scream fest. In my apartment, all the activity started to be aimed at my little sister, who had just started college. Every time she came home, she would refuse to sleep in her bedroom due to feeling creeped out. She would also wake up with scratches on her arms and legs. In her room, she had a poster that would relocate itself on the wall, and most of the time you would be in the other room, hear paper crinkling, and you would walk into her room and it would be a foot to the left or right. So come October, we called in some help. Refer to link. First, let me just say, I was there that night they did their investigation, and most of their evidence is crap. But I will say some of it was unexplainable. And where they say that we found a way to live with them is bullshit. Now, although to this date things are quieter, we still have some random shit going on, and it always increases when my sister is home, although it is less frequent. That is less frequent since she has moved out of the state. But I still wonder what this is and why. TLDR, unexplained shit happening in a new apartment still creeps me out. Now this story gave me the chills mainly because it kind of related to what I dealt with when I was in my apartment. Just really unexplainable things, mischievous things happening, or just odd occurrences. To me, that's just demonic. It's plain and simple. If you're being like physically harmed and hurt, and there's a parent, like a child, quote unquote, it's not a child. It's just a demon deceiving, plain and simple. That is all it is. And just rebuke it. That's all you gotta do. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know. Like, comment, and subscribe for more. And let me know if you'd like to hear more of my personal stories or some more Reddit stories. I would love to read to you guys. Alright, see y'all later.